gonna be toast tomorrow when we're done with you.
Yeah, burnt toast!
Alright friends, so today's video is gonna be different than anything I've ever done. Lately I've just been bored to tears trying to edit normal makeup videos. There was one I was filming a couple weeks ago and I tried 3 different times to film it. I've probably already told you this, but I couldn't even get through filming it because I was so bored. They've been really hard for me to edit, and I still love makeup like crazy. I need like something else to talk about other than myself. After almost 4 years, I just need to make a little bit of a shift. So I've been watching a lot of Bailey Sarian, a lot of Drew Gooden, 2 totally unrelated channels, but have both inspired me because I'm really just into the storytelling thing right now, and I have a ton of new makeup to try out and play with, including the RawBeautyKristi collab with PUR Cosmetics. And I also recently discovered a really good yet really bad, amazing 90s movie that I really think we should talk about because I've never heard anyone talk about it, and I'm amazed that I'd never heard of this movie until Nick showed it to me. And here we are. So grab a snack and a drink. I got my London Fog latte here, and buckle up for a wild ride. Very wild. Today we're talking about the Buttercream gang. So I posted on Twitter not too long ago. I was like, what is the worst movie you've ever seen? What's, your favorite like low budget, bad acting, just like bad movie? I'm a huge fan of bad movies. There was a pretty unanimous vote. The movie The Room won by a landslide. I'll probably end up reviewing that one day if I ever can bring myself to watch it. But my husband actually was like, hey, did you ever watch the Buttercream gang? And I was like, no, and I remember him talking about it. He loves this movie. This is like one of his favorite movies, okay? So I'm not here to like trash it or anything. I mean, I am gonna try it. He was like, oh, you should give it a shot. So I found the movie and it did not disappoint. So the movie opens with this guy, Pete, who ends up kind of being the villain in the story. By the way, there's gonna be spoilers. So the movie starts with this guy, Pete, getting a surprise from his friends up inside a treehouse. They basically surprise him with a bunch of like Chicago stuff. It kind of sets the stage for the movie. You realize that this is a group of friends and this guy, Pete, is moving to Chicago. And just right off the bat, there was a laugh for me because this dude's facial expression when he surprises his friend. He ends up being one of my favorite characters in the movie. So anyway, the stage is set. We got a group of friends. One of them's moving to Chicago. The other ones are upset about it and want him to stay. They have some really cute banter so that you know that they're besties.
I'm a buttercreamer, right? Yeah, you know it.
And then you find out Pete is kind of the leader of the gang, and he's like, all right, before I leave, my final act as president is to nominate Scott as the leader of the Buttercreamers. So long story short, Pete is established as this great guy that has these great relationships in the community. The whole community shows up, to see him on his way to Chicago, and he goes on his merry way. And then comes the first weird and pointless scene of the movie that I just love and adore. And there's many of these throughout the movie. And it's just pure cinematic greatness. So the Buttercreamers are riding / walking their bikes home from school when a little girl comes up to them and she's like,
Scott, Lenny, Eldon, stop! I need you to do something for me.
and you just kind of think to yourself like, oh, they're gonna do something super important, some sort of great trick, right? Like that's where your mind goes, is that something important is gonna happen. Oh no, think again. Essentially what that little girl really needed them to do was an incredibly normal and very average jump rope session in which one of the main characters, Eldon or Elvis, I never really figured out what his name is, does 10 jumps and then they all fall on their butts laughing hysterically. I tried so hard to understand this part. I watched it a couple times. I don't know what I'm missing, especially when you consider like how hard they had to try to get him to do it. And he's like, no, okay, one time, I'll do 10 simple jumps. And it just ends up being a recurring thing throughout the movie where I feel like the director was like, hey kids, do a sport or something. And I feel like these little actor kids had to come up with the sports themselves because none of them make any sense. So anyway, moving on. Oh, it's storming out. Perfect timing. So all of a sudden, apparently a month has gone by and Pete is, thriving in Chicago. You get a glimpse of his aunt. The dialogue between Pete and his aunt is just so bad.
Hey Pete, that's great. If your parents were alive, I think they'd be so proud of you.
hey Pete, that's great. But of course her mouth moving doesn't match the overdubbing, and it was just like an overall bad scene. But the point was, I guess, to establish that his parents had died. This palette is amazing, by the way. It's just blending flawlessly. So time goes on. These new kids he's hanging with, you know, this new gang, they're a bad gang. They're a naughty gang. They do naughty stuff, and apparently they have a requirement that to be in this gang, you have to wear something weird on your head. Like a very odd top hat slash bandana combination like this kid, or various other head coverings. So Pete gets himself arrested, gets expelled from school, and his aunt is like, bro, I'm not feeling this, you're going back.
You're catching a bus home.
Meanwhile, Scott and the gang, the Buttercreamers, are back home playing baseball, being wholesome. And I just love this baseball scene because Eldon slash Elvis is up to bat at baseball practice, and all the kids in the background, the soundbite that they use for the background is so horrendous. Like, if I were gonna play baseball, it would be the last sound I would ever want to hear. I feel like the director had to have told them, like, hey guys, cheer Eldon's name, but try to sound really sad and underwhelmed. Come on, Eldon, let's go. Just inaudible, monotone yelling. Maybe that's what I've been missing this whole time. Anytime I've tried to play a sport, maybe I just need some like monotone shouting. So, you know, Eldon is obviously not great at baseball, so they have a cute little side conversation to like motivate him. It was just kind of an odd conversation. It's like, man, I wish Pete was here. He'd motivate us by using one of those dumb commercials. And they just quote like a Pepsi commercial. I guess to establish that Pete, if he were here, he'd be reciting commercials to motivate them, but like, why?
He'd send a can of Diet Pepsi with the cassette tape of him singing, "You got the right ones, baby."
Why? I can't say I've ever been motivated to do better in sports by a Pepsi commercial. Apparently that's a thing. I've learned a lot about 12-year-old boys from this movie. So then, a little girl runs up in distress and yells to the Buttercreamers,
It's the widow Jenkins! She fell down again!
you guys, what is up with women's first name in movies being replaced by the word widow? Please, heaven forbid, if something ever happens to Nick, please do not refer to me as the widow French. So the little girl has some incredibly distressing news, which is the widow Jenkins, which is apparently an elderly woman, has fallen down and can't get up, and of course says it right in front of an adult, the priest slash coach, but of course instead of the adult doing anything about it, kid's responsibility to go save this old woman. So they straight up just dip out of practice with very minimal explanation.
Hey, wait a minute, guys. Where you going? Sorry, coach. We've got something more important to do.
Sorry, coach. We got something more important to do. They don't even explain that they're going to save someone's life. So they set out to save this poor widow, and they embark on what appears to be the longest bike ride scene I've ever seen in a movie. It lasts like 5 minutes. By the way, this is the new Urban Decay Lash Freak. What is up with this wand? It doesn't like clean off when it comes out of the... Ooh. The scene goes on for what feels like 5 minutes of them riding and riding and riding. Like every time you think they've gotten there, it's like, oh, nope, they're still riding. And then halfway through the scene, Scott's like,
Come on, Eldon, let's go!
oh, now you're gonna step on it? And as I was watching this, I was like, wait a minute, did that little girl run all this way from the widow Jenkins' house all the way to baseball practice? Like, she could have called the police way faster. What do I know? I'm just a grown-up. Oh my god, I hope you guys can see this mascara. Holy cow. That just made my lashes massive, but it's so incredibly messy, it's like not worth it. Alright, I'm trying the lovely lashes, the RawBeautyKristi lovely lashes. So they save the widow Jenkins, the children save widow Jenkins by doing a cool rope swing method, and widow Jenkins is like, hey, could you also get me some groceries? And she's like, be sure to get yourself a treat.
Oh, and be sure you get yourselves a treat now at the store with the chain.
By the way, side note, the writer of this movie, I'm pretty sure treat has to be his favorite word. So they go to the grocery store, not a hugely important scene. Not a hugely important scene other than the fact that you find out where the Buttercream name comes from. Apparently, Mr. What's his name, the guy who owns the store, he was a Buttercreamer back in the day. I guess it started as some of the young men in the town would help the widows in the community by churning their butter. which is the cutest, most wholesome thing ever. If there was a modern day Buttercream gang, I would totally join. Oops, I was supposed to be this close the whole time. I've been like leaning back in my chair like a hooligan with no job. And as the kids are leaving, the store owner says,
The treats are on me. One buttercreamer to another.
again with the treats. Why? They use it again 2 seconds later. Elton/Elton/Elvis says,
Well, what's wrong with getting treats from both?
this is the coziest cozy video ever. Okay, I'm gonna prime my face, which I have been doing lately. Weird, I know, right? I have two products here, the Milk Hydro Grip Primer I've been loving, and this serum from Exuviance. I bought both of these because of a girl I saw on TikTok. Her name is escaping me right now, but she's given me so many great tips that I had never heard of. This was crazy expensive. I almost threw up when I was purchasing it, but she said to use it, so I'll link her stuff down below. She said it's super sticky and like super moisturizing, and that it helps your makeup stay on. Okay, I need to like get my hair pushed back. Oh, it feels so good and grippy. And then this in addition. Again, I'm not like a huge primer person, but I enjoy using the sticky stuff lately because it's just so sticky and like moisturizing, and it's so fun. Does this work? Freaking best thunderstorm ever in the history of me living where I live. Okay, so now for my all-time favorite part of this entire movie. The Buttercreamers are out on their paper route, and they toss a paper at this little girl sitting on her front porch and straight up just smoked her right in the head. Right in the old dome piece. And this was, of course, to establish that Margaret feels invisible, you know, a little foreshadowing. But man, I replayed that scene at least 100 times. There were so many other ways I feel like they could have introduced her character. So then Scott runs into Margaret again at school. I guess it's the next day. Finds out she's doing a report, a very specific report on gangs in Chicago. And the Buttercreamers are all like, oh, I hope Pete doesn't run into this gang that you're doing a report on that happens to be in Chicago. So they remember there's no baseball practice that day, and they're like, hey, there's no baseball practice today. Let's go to Mr. Turner's house, which is Pete's grandpa, the old cowboy, like from the beginning. So they knock on Mr. Turner's door. They hear a familiar voice, and what do you know? It's Pete. And Pete's like, come on in, guys.
Guys, come on in.
Hey, that sounds like Pete.
So they walk in, and Pete is sitting at his grandpa's kitchen table with some Wonder Bread. And what's that? Pete looks different. He's got a weird, really big dad shirt buttoned all the way up, a backwards hat, some white tube socks hanging out. Like, you can obviously tell, like, this guy is in a really bad gang. I'm gonna try this concealer today from Makeup Forever. I ordered from Sephora like 17 weeks ago and still haven't opened. So the kids obviously have tons of questions like, yo, Pete, what the heck? Where have you been? How long have you been back in town? Why didn't you write? Why are you dressed so cool?
What, you mean the threads? Pretty cool, huh? You like them?
Pete basically just evades all of their questions, and he's like, yeah, you know what? I'm kind of hungry.
Why don't we go to Graff's, huh? Get some treats. I'm buying.
Again with the treats. So they head to the treat store, and here's where the plot starts to thicken, and you realize Pete is no longer an innocent little buttercreamer, but a criminal who steals treats from the treat store. Well, Scotty is not feeling this, obviously. His moral compass is askew. What is this? This is from Ofra. A skin sculpting wand. Okay. I guess it's like a contour thing. So Scotty's like, yo, I call a meeting to order. And I was like, okay, they're gonna go like to their little treehouse or whatever and have a meeting. No. The meeting just is right then and there as they're walking.
I want to call a meeting to order.
Here?
It's just so weird. It drives me nuts. You're all already together. Why do you have to say, hey, I'm calling a meeting to order? So Scott's basically like, dude, do you guys think Pete's being weird or not? And they're like, no, I think everything's great. He's never even bought us treats before.
Pete's never bought treats before. I think it's great.
How many is that now? How many times have they said treat so far? Wow, this is crazy pigmented. Okay. But, you know, Elton/Elton is like, no, there's nothing weird. I want to adjourn this meeting as they're still all walking together in their meeting.
How about we adjourn this meeting? I second it.
I'm gonna try and use less this time, maybe. So the meeting's adjourned, and we cut to another scene of kids doing a random arbitrary sport that doesn't actually exist in real life. This time it was just kids standing in a line, and one of them kicks a ball, and they all cheer like it was a good thing, but then they all run away. And then one of them brings the ball back and starts counting, and apparently now it's hide and seek, and it's just incredibly odd, and I am upset about it. So our friend Scotty sees invisible Margaret, and he's like, hey Margs, can I borrow one of your reports? But meanwhile, the child version of Joe Dirt is chilling in the background, I guess hiding from the kids who were playing the weird kickball / hide and seek game. So Margaret's like, yeah, let's walk over to school, I'll get you the report. Meanwhile, like, they never noticed that child Joe Dirt has been spying on them the whole time. I'm gonna use this. So Scott's troubled, you know, and he goes home to his dad and he's like, Dad, I think Pete's been stealing. I'm gonna use the Ofra highlighter in Rodeo Drive. Oh honey. Yes. And Sigma came out with these soft blend brushies. This one looks like the best highlight brush on the planet. So what was I saying? Yeah. So Scott's like telling his dad, like, yo Dad, something's up with Pete. I think he's a treat thief. And then, you know, suggests, oh my gosh, this is insanely beautiful. Suggests like, hey, you know, you didn't really see him steal the treats, so if you're not sure, you should ask him about it. That's good advice, you know. You can't just assume your friends are treat thieves. Treat thieves. And then little Joe Dirt shows up. So I guess she's like Scott's sister. I don't really know if they ever established it, but again, she's just creepily eavesdropping in the background and nobody seems to care. So Scott goes up in his room, and who's sitting up in his room but Pete?
What's up, man?
The treat thief. And Pete's like, yo, listen, thanks for not saying anything back there. I picked up some bad habits in Chicago. Hanging out with you is really helping me be a better person. Meanwhile, Joe Dirt's listening the whole time. He just kind of manipulates Pete, you know, and like changes the subject, diverts his attention by bringing up commercials again. He straight up like makes fun of a Life Alert commercial.
I've fallen down and I can't get up.
And I'm like, are they maybe hinting that the widow Jenkins should have had a Life Alert? I don't know, man. He does a weird, creepy laugh. And then we move on. So then we enter into this montage of what Pete's up to. He makes some new friends. They don't play the audio, but you can tell he's like, hey guys, do you want to be in a gang? I'll teach you how to do gang stuff. The only requirement is that you wear like something on your head in a weird way. And then we just see, you know, kind of a conflict of Pete switching back and forth between doing wholesome Buttercream stuff, like flipping this bat, and then doing gang stuff. Going to the park and like kicking little girls off of seesaws and throwing Pringles and kicking dirt and stuff. You know, typical gang-related activity. Meanwhile, the Buttercreamettes are observing everything and they're like, So Margs comes up to the treehouse where the Buttercreamers, you know, meet in secret, and she's like, hey Scott, Pete's doing some really like shady, gangy stuff. You need to do the right thing, stand up to him, and also you owe me a favor and you need to take me to the dance.
Pick me up at 7 and don't be late.
So on his way home, you know, to get ready for the dance, he sees that Pete and the naughty gang are riding their bikes around Margaret in a circle, yelling obscenities at her. He watches it for a long time and then suddenly goes, he's like, oh heck no, you're not gonna ride your bikes around my girlfriend in a circle, not on my watch. Straight up runs the guy over, and he tells Pete like, look, if you don't start, you know, pulling your weight with the Buttercreamers, you're out. And Pete's like, dude, I don't need to be kicked out, I quit. I got my own gang now. They wear headbands. You know, it's over between us, basically. So they get to the dance. It's just a gloriously 90s scene with puffy sleeves and a DJ who talks into the microphone without actually saying anything. Things are going well, and what do you know, Pete shows up with his naughty gang and he ruins the dance. He like throws a firecracker through the window or something, and Scott chases him down and he's like, oh heck no, Pete. And Scott really shows some bravery. Like, this is where I really started to just love Scott's character. He totally stands up to Pete, and Pete's like, all right, you know what, let's fight. Our gangs are gonna fight each other tomorrow at the field at this time. He walks off with his gang. And then my second favorite part of the movie is when Lenny and Eldon are yelling after Pete and his gang, and Lenny's like, you're gonna be toast tomorrow when we're done with you. And Eldon's like,
Yeah, burnt toast!
Way to go, Elvis. You showed him. Would you show up to a fight after someone called you burnt toast? I wouldn't. So the next day comes, the day of the fight that's supposed to happen, but you know, Scott's not feeling it. He hears some stuff at church about turning the other cheek, and he's like, you know what? Instead of fighting, I'm gonna challenge Pete to spend the day with me. And Pete like agrees to it. So, you know, they spend the day together. They go fishing, they go swimming. You think things are going well and Pete's gonna like see the light, but he doesn't, of course, and they end up getting in a fight.
Who asked for your friendship anyways, huh?
You did that night at my house.
Scott runs away, so that solved nothing. So the next day is the big baseball championship that Scott's been soups nervous about, and he's doing terribly.
Strike one, right down the middle.
Turns out Scott's really not a good baseball player throughout this whole movie, by the way. So his teammates are like, man, Scott's doing really bad. We need to like help him. So Elvis stands up, walks up to the fence, and he's like,
You got the right one, baby. Uh-huh.
and then of course the whole team joins in.
You got the right one, baby.
Because why would you not? I'm gonna have to try this method. From here on out, if I ever make like a terrible video that flops, can you guys just cheer me on and be like, you got the right one, baby. Uh-huh. You got the right one, baby. Uh-huh. I think I'm gonna try that on Nick next time he's doing the dishes or something. I'm gonna use this Ofra Universal Eyebrow Pencil. See how that goes. So, you know, naturally Scott starts doing better because his friends chanted that Pepsi commercial at him. Things are going well, the Red Sox are kicking butt, but then, uh-oh, Pete shows up. He starts heckling Scott, which of course causes him to, you know, suck again.
Come on, Braves, send these Red Sox home.
It kills me too, because every time they show Pete, he like gets closer and closer. He really wants to heckle this like little league baseball team, even though he's like 20 years old. It's a super long scene that I feel like should have been edited way down. And then they don't ever show the end of the game, so you don't know who wins or loses. You just see the coach slash priest talking to Scott, giving him a lesson about like loving your neighbor, and you know, there's a lot of like underlying Christian themes throughout this movie.
You said the idea of an eye for an eye only ended up making the rest of the world blind.
Scott goes to head home and Pete like apprehends him on the bike path. They shake hands and you're like, oh, everything's fine. But then Pete beckons his hat-wearing friends over and they like jump Scott, beat him up. Scott's dad, you know, gives him some advice, same exact advice that everyone's been giving him throughout this whole movie, which is like, love people even though they don't love you back. Just be nice to Pete, even though he just beat you up and bloodied your nose. Scott's like, all right. And then he goes to Mr. Graff, the store owner, and he's like, look, Mr. Graff, Pete's been stealing treats from you. And then Mr. Graff's like, yeah, I know. I've been letting him steal my treats, and in fact, now I'm just gonna start giving him the treats. For free.
From now on, I'm just gonna give him the treats.
Again, this is a recurring theme throughout this movie. So then it just cuts to this incredibly confusing montage of everyone in the community being nice to Pete. Scott gives him a bike. Old man Graff gives him free soda. He even gets like weirdly forced into playing football with the neighborhood kids. Meanwhile, Pete just continues to be awful and do hood rat stuff and sabotage Scott and the Buttercreamers. Like he runs over the flowers they planted and steals papers from his paper route. He just, whatever they're doing is clearly not remotely working. And then it all comes to a head one day when they find out Pete is in trouble. Serious trouble. Lenny rides up on his bike and he's like, I think someone broke into Pete's house. And Scott's like, are you sure? And Lenny's like, no.
Oh, but I left Elvin there to watch.
That just killed me. Like, are you sure? No. Oh, okay, well, let's rush over there then. And again, this is another situation where instead of calling the police, the children just handle it themselves. You know, the literal crime that's being committed. Margs even like suggested calling the police this time, and they were like, nah.
We better go check it out first.
So they get to Pete's grandpa's house, and what's this? A bad guy has Pete hostage. If you listen really close to the hostage exchange, it just kills me because the bad guy wants the grandpa's gold coins and the grandpa's like, no, they're at the bank in a safety deposit box. And Pete, you know, the one being held hostage with like arms around his neck, he's like, Grandpa, he literally saw your gold coins here the other day. Don't lie to him. The insurance will cover it. Just don't let him hurt me.
Grandpa, I saw him here the other day. Don't worry about it. The insurance will pay for it. Don't let him hurt me.
That's a red flag, you know, that Pete's sitting there being attacked by an intruder, but yet was reasonable enough to tell his grandpa that insurance would cover everything. So they walk outside. The bad guy still has Pete, you know, in a headlock, and he's got pantyhose on his head, which is super intimidating. And the neighborhood kids that are all suddenly there are able to just totally stop the bad guy by jumping on him or something. And then Elvis runs up and he's like, earthquake! And he like jumps on Pantyhose guy's belt. And that did it, you know, that stopped the bad guy. He ran off. And as an audience member, you're like, okay, now Pete is finally gonna learn his lesson. Like, his friends just saved him from Pantyhose guy. He's totally gonna see the light. But guess what? Plot twist! Turns out Pete set up the whole thing to like rob his grandpa, which... If one more person is mean to that old man in this movie, I swear. So his plan's foiled, you know, so he runs off, tries to rob Mr. Graff at the store, and Mr. Graff's like, go ahead, take it. Here, you want some more? Here's $200. If I give it to you, you can't rob me. And Pete's like, what the heck? I'm trying to rob you.
You don't give somebody the money who's trying to rob you and say, well, now you're not robbing me.
Can you just imagine, like, if this were real life, if there was, like, a troubled person, you know, who starts committing crimes and the entire community comes together to kill the person with kindness. So he's super mad that nobody will let him like commit crimes and that everyone in the community is being really nice to him. He runs off back to Chicago. Scott continues to write this guy letters constantly. Like, no one has told Scott yet to have any self-respect. Can someone send Scott one of those memes that's like, delete the toxic people in your life? It cracked me up too, because apparently an entire year goes by and Scott still has not moved on with his life. He's like, man, Pete, I don't know if you're getting my letters. It's horrible. So finally, we're in the home stretch. Scott comes home one day, his whole family's in the living room. I totally thought they were gonna tell him that Pete had died because they all had weird looks on their faces.
I'm really proud of you. You did the right thing.
I'm proud of you. You did the right thing. But it turns out there was a letter from Pete's aunt, you know, the lady who makes spaghetti with ketchup, and she included a newspaper article in her letter that basically said Pete had started another gang, but this time it was a good gang. So he basically started a Chicago branch of the Buttercream gang. So all that hard work by that entire community paid off, which is very wholesome and very realistic, and just, you know, an overall great end to this movie. Until, of course, Margaret says, hey, like, can a girl join the Buttercream gang? And the kids are like, a girl? I'd let this lying, cheating, treat thieving, Pringle kicking, bandana wearing, dance ruining, kid pushing, commercial reciting lunatic join the Buttercream gang, but not a girl. Look, I don't know. All I know is the little Jenkins fell down again. The kids had to go save her. And the very last line of the movie is so fitting because I think it's Lenny that says,
Come on, time's wasted.
and I just couldn't agree with him more because that movie was an hour and a half that I wasted. I'm kidding, guys, I'm kidding. I love the moral of the story, which is basically let people do whatever they want, commit crimes, take kids off of seesaws, give them your bike, and maybe they'll start a good gang that churns the butter of widows. For real though, guys, this was like the most wholesome movie I've ever seen. I love how 90s it is. I love that kids play outside in this movie, even though their games are super weird and arbitrary. And I think it's kind of cute that my husband likes this movie, so I'll be watching this one again and again, like on a rainy day. And you know what? I had a blast, honestly. This is way more fun to me than just doing like normal makeup videos. So if you too like really good bad movies and you want to see me do more of these, let me know down below. Maybe we'll do like a makeup and movies Monday or something. Like I said, all the products I used today will be in the description box in case you have any questions about anything. I thoroughly enjoyed this palette that RawBeautyKristi did with PUR Cosmetics. I love their shadows anyway. I just think her color selection was bomb, you know. And look, the other side has bright fun colors. Maybe we'll do this next time and I'll do another bad movie like glitter or something. All right, friends, love you. See you in the next one. Bye. There's a little window from my studio into like our house, and Nick just flashed me. Hey, be louder.
What?
Be louder.
I'm being real loud? What do you mean, like just shutting doors and stuff, or what?
Slamming doors and singing while I'm filming.
I'm singing?
I really liked how Scott asked Pete, hey, how's your aunt's spaghetti? Because apparently the aunt makes spaghetti with ketchup, which is very upsetting and reminds me of Honey Boo Boo's mom.